Organization of United Cities and Local Governments, Metropolis and UN Habitat, we would like to welcome you back to this Beyond the Outbreak experience. Before yielding the floor to our Secretary General, Emilia Saiz, I would like to go through some technical details. As you know, we have interpretation in English, Spanish, and French. You can see the icon below in your screen. Feel free to speak in your language, and when speaking in your own language, please select the off interpretation so that the interpreters can go through the channel and everyone can listen only to one of them. Welcome back on behalf of UCLG, UN Habitat, and Metropolis. Emilia, the floor is yours.
Well, it's wonderful to have you all back. You are all here, not because you can tick some box or belong to a certain geographical group or anything like that. This is a closed meeting with a selected group of participants because you have been contributing to this special road that we have had to go through during the COVID pandemic, and that is still going on, because you have contributed very actively and meaningfully in one way or the other to our live learning exercises. So not everybody that should be here is here, probably, but we really want it here. And it is a closed meeting. Don't take this as one more webinar. We are really trying to build further with you. You showed in your participation in the life learning experiences that you wanted to contribute to this new way of working, that you shared our vision about the transformation that we needed. And this is why we have called you to go through this organic process from live learning experiences to cities are listening experiences. We have had many months to exchange experiences among local and regional governments. We gave the floor significantly to mayors and elected officials. We will continue to do that, but we think it is important to brainstorm with you, the civil society partners, and some of the core cities that are part of this community that we have been building, to see what we need to do next. Meeting is not enough, and that's not the objective. So this is a little bit the frame of what we're trying to do today. I will give you some additional information in a moment, but first I would like to give the floor to the Executive Director of UN Habitat, who is co-convener of this meeting and of this series, and then I will give the floor to Octavio de la Varga, the Secretary General of Metropolis. Maimuna, the floor is yours to share with us in 3 minutes or so what the live learning experiences have been for you in Habitat and how you look at this new phase. Executive Director.
Thank you very much, Emilia, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends. A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, wherever you are in this world. I'm happy to meet all of you again after the first session, and now we continue with cities are listening. I think it's a great honor and immense pleasure that I joined you for this brainstorming session to kick off this new series of meeting hosted by UCLG, Metropolis, and UN Habitat entitled Cities Are Learning. And throughout the past months, actually, since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have joined our efforts and gathered around the live learning experiences session, in which I firmly believe and personally invested. And we also present this at a high level political forum, and we can see the outcomes. And the inputs collected have provided us with the inspirations and drive to develop the forward thinking that will guide us into the decade of action towards the full implementation of SDG and beyond the COVID-19 outbreak. So let me share my gratitude. We have walked hand in hand and created a community of practices, and with no equal around the globe. And we now want to consolidate and expand. So to hear solidarity is what inspired us in the past month. And it is this spirit that through the first edition of the Cities Are Listening meeting, UCLG Metropolis and UN Habitat want to open a unique space for multi-stakeholders engagement and co-creation to build back better, to build back greener, to build back more equity towards more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable world. I would like to have three major points to make very fast. First is that cities has been critically affected by the COVID-19 outbreak, and it is within cities where to a large extent the battle against the pandemic was and is still being fought. So this battle has brought out to light the best and the worst of our societies. So from one hand, solidarity and innovative partnership characterize the response to this health crisis. And on the other hand, this pandemic has exposed and exacerbated the deep-rooted structural fragilities and spatial inequalities, especially in urban areas. As you know, today, 55% of the world population live in cities. This is expected to rise 70% by 2050, making urbanization one of the most significant trends of the 21st century. And urbanization has brought with increased wealth as cities generate 80% of the world economy. But yet, when poorly planned and managed, it generates environmental degradation and inequalities. But you know that living nearly 1.8 billion people live in adequate housing, slum and slum-like conditions with acute risk of exposure to the impact of consequences of crisis and pandemic. And as you know that 70% of the households in cities of developing world have access to clean water, but only 40% of those living in slums have such access. Why? So we have to question ourselves. So all these considerably few have a direct household connection, relying on standpipe wells, boreholes, and kiosks of water vendors. So less than half of the global population can access to public spaces within 400 meters walking distance from their home. So this is then a paramount important that the context of countries repositioning towards recovery, innovation is applied to rebuild cities on more resilient and green foundation and to develop planning models that focus on sustainable level of connectivity. So this centralization of local access to all basic services and infrastructure, including health, could contribute towards preventing and slowing the spread of future pandemics and to ensure safe, inclusive, and resilient cities. In this recovery effort, the overall formula to build back better already exists, that is called Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. So together with the new urban agenda, the SDGs offer a unique working framework that can guide cities and communities out of this pandemic. So responding effectively to the COVID-19 and working towards the realization of the SDG is not an either no choice. So there are two sides of the same coin. Indeed, if cities can address critical concern at the heart of the pandemic, inadequate housing, we discussed in the first session, unequal access to public services, unequal distribution and access to public space, they will be able to advance towards the achievement of the SDG targets, especially contributing to the localization of the SDGs at the cities. Third, solidarity and partnership. We cannot do it alone. So are the way forward. So only through the sharing of experiences and cutting edge knowledge, cities can ensure a sustainable and greener recovery. So two elements are therefore very critical. We need to provide cities and all local regional government with the adequate resources, human, legal, and financial, to continue fighting the pandemic and to propel us towards a green and inclusive urban future. We need to empower local communities, learn from their experiences, and structurally involve civil groups in the decision-making process for the rethinking and redesigning of our society. This will not be easy, and none of us can do it alone. I think that's why I'm very happy and completely supportive of the Cities Are Listening meetings, a unique space for multi-stakeholders engagement and for the exchange of innovation that will lead us beyond the outbreak. So, my friend, we are at the cusp of one of the most important moments in our life. We have the power to make the right choices and to transform this pandemic into an opportunity to rebuild a better, green, and inclusive world, starting from our cities, from our multi-stakeholders, multi-level partnership, and from this SDG framework. So UN Habitat is listening to our city partners and stand ready to build bridges and partnerships to support cities and communities in making policy choices that will place resilience and sustainability at the center of the recovery process. Cities are listening, UN Habitat is too. Thank you very much to all of you, and I trust that you all enjoy this new online discussion series, and I'm looking forward to the end of the series to get something that concrete that what we did in the first series. Thank you very much, Amelia. Thank you very much, colleague. Over to you, Amelia.
Thank you very much, Maimuna. And the life learning experiences were very much the basis that the local and regional governments constituency used to provide feedback to UN Habitat that was holding the pen for the UN Secretary General briefing on the role of cities in the COVID times. A very significant brief that was produced, that we commented on, that we were happy to comment on its launch, and that I think needs to be our focus when talking with the international community, and make sure that the things that we do together here feed into the process of making that briefing a reality. So let us keep this connection in mind. Because our tasks needs to go further than the exchange of experience, and I think some of the products that we have produced together are already a very big support to that, and when introducing Octavi, is unavoidable also to make reference to the Cities for Health platform. That has gathered many inputs, and where many of the experiences of the life learning experience are also documented. So, Octavi, how are you looking at the next phase, and what did it mean for you, this live learning experience track?
Hello, everybody from Barcelona, and thank you, Emila, and thank you, Executive Director of UN Habitat, also for having on board Metropolis on this second phase of the life learning experiences. But I think, as you said, I'm starting from the end, Emilia. I really like it when you said we need to move from exchanging and thinking to action. Of course, we need to keep on doing exchanging thinking and exchanging ideas. What we have discovered is that when this pandemic became worldwide, we were almost kind of rising from the previous crisis, social, economic, and financial crisis all around the world. And at that point, you remember in 2008, everybody was making promises about changing things, changing the way we're doing things, the need to go greener, to build more fair societies, more equal societies, more opportunities, etc. And this pandemic exploded, and we realized that nothing had changed. But I think we have here an opportunity, is that this pandemic is especially placing in a good position local governments. I mean, we are discovering, and that's what we're discovering from the life learning experiences, is that local governments, that cities could change things, could do things in a different way. And also we discover that some of the processes that we had already put in place, especially taking into account the new urban agenda, the Agenda 2030, were being accelerated. And as well, we were confronted to some realities that we didn't want it to be confronted. And some as well, some of the gaps, social gaps and inequalities were also deepened in this process. And I think the life learning experience, and it was, you remember, it was by July that I sent you, and sorry if I'm being a bit informal here, I sent a WhatsApp to Emilia, say, okay, and now on. I mean, the life learning experiences, we need them, and I think we need to keep them, and what are we going to do now? And for example, one of the consequences of these life learning experiences is we produced a document in Metropolis, which was called A Call to Rethink Metropolitan Spaces. And it's in this idea, and that's why we need to work together with you, is we need to reshape the way we're doing things. We need to rethink the way we design the cities. We need to rethink how we want to do the cities of the future, but we don't have to wait until the pandemic is over to start thinking these things, because the pandemic is still there and it will be for a while. So we need as well really to work on solutions and on practical proposals. And of course, we need as well to have this platform. We will be working together on this platform of Cities for Global Health, because we need to document all these experiences. We need to keep on exchanging, but as well, we need as well to develop a specific proposal. And as well, this idea of opening our discussions to other stakeholders, to civil society organizations. In our call to rethink metropolitan spaces, we acknowledge that we local governments alone, we cannot do it. We cannot do it. We need to join forces with other actors, and especially to civil society organizations. And I think this idea of cities are listening to rethink and to be proactive and to build a new way of doing things, I think it's very, very positive.
Well, thank you very much, Octavi, for your inputs, for your continued support. Let me show you a tool that we have sent the link to you, but we feel it's a tool where you can relive the experience at your own path. It's a tool where you can actually navigate. It's a platform. And colleagues, if we can go scroll down and go to the interactive part where we can see all the different sessions and link into one of them. I want to show you how we are trying to tell the story of what we did together. We have put this in a single online platform where you are able to visit everything that happened in each of the sessions. And you are able to recover all the resources, all the policy briefs that were produced, all the quotes, all kinds of things. And it is organized a little bit in a different way than we have been doing in the very dry policy briefs that come out of these things. We have identified the challenges, the key takeaways. We have tried to simplify the messages and also give these human faces to everybody that has been contributing. We have also included some of the documented cases of the cities that participated. This is still not launched. We are finalizing everything, and we will be launching it very soon. But we wanted you to take a look because we feel that it might be a useful tool for you to share with others. In fact, if I have to summarize what we have achieved during this live learning experience, it's extremely difficult because it's much more transformative than you can actually say in a couple of minutes. There were over 60 hours of exchanges with over 200 cities putting through and sharing their cases, with over 260 speakers. I mean, a very high numbers, 3,000 people mobilized, attending all the sessions, a lot of information there. And all of you played a very specific role in them. Now, what we are trying to do also with this tool is we are trying to link these exchanges that we had, which were really grounded in what we were going through at the very moment that it was happening. The needs on housing, the needs on public transportation, the impact on migration, so many different topics on security, etc. We have tried to link it also to some of the political recommendations around the UCLG Decalogue, which is a document that sets 10 priorities for the post-COVID era. We hope that you find this useful, that you can share it with your bases, and also that you can stimulate some of your partners to follow our online course that we have produced around all of these materials, and we have already 300 registrations to follow the course. So just to let you know that the live learning experiences did not stop, did not end in the different exchanges that we have. And that's why we are together today. So the session, we are going to try to organize the session in a way that we give the floor to as many of you as possible. I hope to all of you. All of you will have 3 minutes to provide your messages, giving us some inputs around two key questions, which is what are your priorities, but also what do you think the priorities should be of local and regional governments in this pandemic? And then knowing that, what do you think we should do together? What would be the next series like? And we will not need to find all the answers in this session, but I hope we can get all food for thought to start shaping it. So let us try it out. I invite you to be quite strict with time so that all of you can speak, because it's a true luxury to have you all together in one space. So I want to use your ideas and your inputs as much as possible. And let me start with the voice of an elected official. That of Laia Bonet, the deputy mayor of Barcelona. She was on board from moment zero, I would say. Even before we announced it, she was already on board, and has been in many of the live learning experience, or ensured that her city was represented in one way or the other. So Laia, we would be delighted to hear how you see this, and how do you feel we could continue supporting cities like Barcelona around this time, and with the tools that we have or that we need to develop. Laia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emilia, and thank you also for sharing with us the results of this interesting learning experience we had during these terrific, terrible months. And let me start also by saying good afternoon to all from Barcelona, even if Octavi is in Barcelona, and so we are together here in this city, and also Emilia. But let me start also by saying that I think it is really important to do this sort of brainstorming exercise now, at the beginning of a new political year, to make the most of it. So I will make my best to stick to my 3 minutes and try to convey what I think are a few issues that would strengthen our work as a cities organization. I think that the phase we are entering now, after strict lockdowns are over, at least here in Europe, is one of progressive recovery while trying to manage the virus resurgence, which is not easy. At the local level, I think that an opportunity window has opened to set up transformative projects for our cities. The coming year will likely be one of urban transformation that adapts our cities to the effects of the pandemic and leverages this to promote more structural change that addresses the ecological transition, digitalization, and the care economy. Many of us have already started implementing policies that go in this direction, from addressing digital inclusion as a right to democratizing public space. In this context, UCLG has a relevant contribution to make in supporting urban transformation. I think this goes in two directions: providing visibility and offering spaces for concrete learning among cities. First, there are important political bets that we are doing in many of our recovery and post-COVID policies. Many times, while they focus on fostering urban transformations for the common good, they come at huge political costs internally as they touch private interests in the city. We need support in this. We are accountable to our citizens and we are subject to criticism because we are a democracy. But when we go out there and put in place courageous policies, we also need recognition. And here I think that, of course, our cities organization, UCLG, but also the United Nations as a role, has a role to play in highlighting transformative policies. So I think there is a communication dimension that needs to be very present in the coming months to help us put out there not only broader policy messages, but also to showcase and recognize concrete policies that are being implemented in cities to build back better. And second, precisely because we are doing new things, we somehow have the need to check whether we are doing the right thing or not. I think it will be important to us to find spaces in which we can candidly exchange about policies we are implementing in the post-lockdown context, the challenges we are encountering and how we are addressing them. Such dialogues do not necessarily need to be at a political level and neither be always public. Political and technical exchanges can run in parallel, and both need to build on the needs that our World Secretariat identifies among member cities. Of course, that adds on the continued advocacy efforts that are central to our organization's work. But I just wanted to convey the value that we from Barcelona attach to UCLG's strengthened work on the issues I just mentioned. So thank you, Emilia, and I'm very glad to see you all again.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Laia. I think Octavia and I can identify very much with some of the needs that you are explaining in terms of creating a safe port to exchange experiences, going in depth, checking whether they work or not. And I think being surrounded by some of the key stakeholders will be very relevant. So we need to make sure that that we find that, while still allowing for exchanges among cities and ensuring that that those exchanges of experiences still happen. So allow me now, my proposal is that I go now to a non-UN perspective. The UN Special Envoy for Disability and Accessibility, Maria Soledad Cisternas, she's with us today. She needs to leave soon, and I want to make sure that she takes the floor. And then I want to give the floor to Maria Fernanda Espinosa, who had the tough job of being the president of the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly, but also now has been very active in engaging us around the world of health. And it is actually thanks to her that our networks are starting to look into this topic. So you are warned, Maria Fernanda, but first I am going to Maria Soledad. Maria Soledad, a ti la palabra.
Emilia, I think the UN Special Envoy is having some technical problems. We're in
Okay, so let us go to Maria Fernanda. Maria Fernanda, are you ready? You are always ready.
Thank you so much, Emilia. And sorry, but my enthusiasm with my hand was because of Maria Soledad. I know that she cannot see my hand, but I was so pleased to see her among us. And I think the voice of the persons with disabilities is so important. It's extremely important. And she's so talented and powerful. So that was my enthusiasm. Sorry, I wasn't raising my hand or anything like that. But now that you're giving me the floor, I will just quick use my 3 minutes. Thank you so much, UCLG, Emilia, Maimuna, and Metropolis for bringing us together once again. I have to say that I love the Decalogue for the post-COVID-19 era, where I was really touched by this phrase: our cities, towns, and territories will never be the same in the aftermath of this crisis. And it is so true. But I also, I listened carefully, and it is true. These times of hardship have also been times of dialogue, of opportunity, of solidarity and creativity. And it has been so true for local and regional governments, because you have shown your strength as strategic allies and actors at the forefront of the response to the pandemic. So solidarity among territories and communities has been an antidote to what we have seen, the worst of society, as Maimuna was mentioning, discrimination, exclusion, and rising inequalities during this crisis. Local governments have been really a powerful muscle to address the current sanitary crisis, but also strategic actors in the crafting of the Building Back Better dynamic. I was listening to the Vice Mayor of Barcelona, and it's so true. We are reinventing ourselves. We are being very, very creative. The cities are listening experience, I think, has shown how important it is to reconnect the scales, to fix the disconnect between national governments and people at the ground, but also, and I want to stress that, dear friends and colleagues, between the role of international institutions and local needs. What comes in between are local governments, precisely. And also the disconnect between policy that most of the time is designed up there, you know, by governments and even international organizations, but to mend this disconnect between policy and action, between communities of practice and communities of knowledge, between policy and local experience. I think we need to overcome collectively these trust deficit in institutions and democracies. And that's where cities, local and regional governments come to play. I think that cities are listening. It's been really a powerful means to reconnect the scale, to reconnect the dialogue. And to be very, very concrete, now I would say basically three ideas, because that was the question. Local and regional governments should have a seat in national and international governance structures to respond to the COVID crisis. And not only with a voice, but with a decision-making power. And believe me that I take part of a lot of conversations internationally, and we see the missing link of the local government's voices. We are discussing within the UN reform, inclusion, multiple voices, and I think that is our moment. And I'm saying our because I feel part of your family in a way. The number two is that local and regional governments should be key implementation agents with the necessary resources, human, financial, for boosting public health systems to respond to the pandemic, but also to guaranteeing universal health coverage. And you know that very well, Emilia, because we are struggling in the same battle on universal health coverage. Local governments implementation, it should be an implementation arm of strong public health systems. The number three is economic recovery packages. We listen to Maimuna and the numbers, where the economy moves very much in urban settings. Local governments have to play and should continue to play a key implementation role in the economic recovery, job creation, green investment through robust social and economic plans. So we need to build back better, more resilient territories and communities, and this has to come also from local and regional governments. And I think that this year's Sustainable Development Report, the implementation of the SDG was very, very clear. The more you work under the umbrella of the SDGs, the more you were able to be resilient to the pandemic. And that was a very, very strong message. We all know, especially you, that over 70% of the 2030 agenda is delivered and implemented by local and regional governments. And just to close, three just headlines. One is the feminist lens, the role of women, the women in power, women taking decisions, but also women as victims of the escalating domestic violence. Services and shelters should be considered essential services, as well as services of sexual and reproductive health, women with disabilities. Well, I'm sure that we are going to hear about that. The number two, food security. Over 130 million more people will be into chronic hunger by the end of 2020. This is a critical issue, and the number three, of course, is climate resilience. These would be, you know, the three top issues, perhaps, if we needed to choose one. And just one word on the Cities Are Listening digital clearinghouse. I think it's very powerful as a tool. Perhaps a small recommendation on typologies of good practices, protocols, and prevention mechanisms. Typologies of cities and regional governments in success factors for responding to the pandemic. No, and that should include not only in terms of health services, but in terms of local democracies, local decision-making, decentralization versus centralized processes. And so it becomes also a reference tool for the macro trends. And I would stop there. I have a little more here, but I think that I've used my 3 minutes, already. So if there is a second opportunity, I'll be more than happy.
That's what we're going to try. Thank you very much, Maria Fernanda, for this. I think your advice also on the repository tool is very relevant for the Cities for Global Health also, and the next phases of that repository. I understand that the special envoy had to leave us, so I am going to Mohamed Metkani, who is the Secretary General of one of our critical partners around mobility. And is one of these public services that has highlighted the importance of public service provision also during this pandemic, heavily criticized, suffering from resources in the pandemic and probably after the pandemic, but so critical for society. Mohamed, some views on how we could build on this community that we are working on together. 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and thank you for all previous speakers, because it's really very inspiring what was shared up to now. And I took note of many of the not just ideas, but also on suggestions made, and the focus on solidarity and partnership, the focus on communication, on rethinking the way we do things, on reconnecting the different scales of the authorities, reinventing ourselves, and really we are in the middle of all this. These challenges, and I am very happy that I am participating in this meeting, and I would like to thank, of course, UCAG, you, Emilia, and UN Habitat and Metropolis for involving us. I'm speaking, of course, on behalf of UITP. So my suggestions or what I would like to share with you are focusing on public transport, and especially this year, we are celebrating 135 years UITP, and I'm very happy to share with you some of our approach. So that COVID-19, it had impacted a lot public transport, of course, drastically, with the decrease of ridership, and it means a decrease of revenues, but also the additional cost of disinfection, of implementing physical distancing in public transport, and we have a lot of challenges in this sector. But at the same time, this crisis is showing how fundamental to city public transport really is, and the essential role played by public transport, but public transport workers in particular, these guardians of mobility who continue to work and to serve the essential workers during this pandemic. So you raised 2 questions, Emilia. One is, what are the priorities that the local and regional governments constituency needs to consider? And I think I would like to share with you 5, let's say. Of course, we cannot say 5 priorities, because above, if you are more than 3, they are not priorities anymore, but 5 ideas anyway, or 5 lines of actions. First is that the public transport really should be the backbone of urban mobility across across all exit strategies that aim, of course, to shift car traffic in cities towards more sustainable mobility. So public transport as a backbone, and together with of course, walking is fundamental, cycling. And public transport when we look to the economic benefits, they are 5 times more greater than the money invested in it. So we have to take this into consideration, and government should really include the sector in the financial recovery plans. And there are some governments doing that, but it needs to be reinforced. The second is that public transport sector, the public sector, must step in to guarantee a certain level of stability through dedicated mobility funds. So, and we can consider here some alternative funding schemes like congestion charging, and we have now the traffic is growing in many cities, and it's the opportunity. We have now a window of opportunity to introduce congestion charging, road pricing, but also we need some agile regulatory frameworks to make it possible to adapt to changing context, not to say to crisis context. The third is that the current crisis is offering a golden opportunity for policymakers to integrate transport with urban planning. And it was mentioned already about rethinking the cities, and this is, we have an opportunity there, and we have to do it by putting people at the heart of our cities, by providing first accessible, safe, breathable, and walkable streets. The fourth aspect is about travel demand management. So it plays a key role to decongest the peak. And it means we need more flexible work and school timetables to avoid rush hour effects. We need new habits like such, I mean, teleworking, I'm sure it will continue where it is feasible, and this teleworking will contribute to flatten the curve. And fifth is that we need to adopt positive communication measures. We are in a crisis moment, and we have to really be careful about the way we communicate during crisis times. And we have to communicate based on hard facts, based on science, on data, and in order to restore the trust in public transport, especially. And we have heard many high-ranking governmental officials calling explicitly to avoid public transport. Some of them are even calling to use cars. Without any scientific basis for such a statement, and this is of course unacceptable. So it's even dangerous because it's a very short-sighted view of which the effect would be more adverse than the coronavirus in the longer term. So it's important, and it was mentioned, the collaboration with the national authorities, because in general these are the one communicating in this field. So it's important that they take the responsibility and they don't communicate. They have to communicate based on hard facts and science. And then the second questions you raised was, how can the cities, our listening experience, leverage what we have learned and continues to fulfill its purpose? So, and here I would like to make two suggestions, and very concrete suggestions, potential actions. One is to continue our advocacy efforts through a joint communication campaign together on the need of essential public services. We are now developing a campaign called Back to Better Mobility in UITP, and I would like to invite you all to join, because I'm convinced that if we communicate together this kind of message, we will be stronger and they will be heard. So this is one concrete suggestion. And the second one is to explore maybe the possibilities to develop a joint training and capacity building programs addressed to elected officials and to leaders in urban transport. And we would be happy to contribute to that and to collaborate on that with you. So I hope this proposal will resonate in you. And I would like to conclude by thanking you again for this initiative. And really we acknowledge and applaud those local and regional governments who have decided to bet on public transport, recognizing how essential the sector is. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to follow the
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I think that some of the ideas that you have given, in particular these two very concrete proposals around joint communication and joint training tools are very much, I think, part and parcel of where our joint activities could be geared towards. And we have already some experience around this, and I hope the representatives of the unions can actually share the experience that we had developing a joint communique around service provision. Next speaker would be Lorena Zarate on behalf of the Global Platform for the Right to the City. And then I would say Basu, Barbara, and Billy stand ready, and we're going to try to stick to the 3 minutes, but you are all making such interesting remarks. I'm trying to be a bit flexible. So Lorena, are you ready?
Never ready. But never fully ready, but here. Thank you, Emilia. Thank you very much to the organizers for this invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to have this opportunity. I apologize because I have another previous appointment and I will need to leave very soon. So thank you for the opportunity to address you now. Totally share all the proposals and ideas and evaluations that previous colleagues have made. And in particular, I think part of the success of the Beyond the Outbreak initiative experience were like 4 or 5 elements that I want to highlight because I think they might be helpful in moving forward. One is this ability to explicitly connect the need to reflect and think about both the emergency and the medium and long-term transformations and structural changes, and connecting that all the time in the debates and the proposals. I think that was key, and that we need to maintain that. And we know that this is not a regular conventional emergency, that we don't have, it's not a particular moment, it's not a particular event, it's more like a condition, and probably a permanent condition for quite some time ahead. So it's not really like 6 months and then the recovery and then etc. So it's not a natural disaster, it's not a particular event. So the second one, I think, is the ability also to combine the big picture with the very concrete aspects or elements in the sense of sharing common vision, sharing values, and discussing and reviewing those things at the same time that we were evaluating concrete measures and policies on the ground. And I think that was very, very important. It's not always easy to do that, but that was key. And I think we need to maintain that too in moving forward. The third one is this combination, the ability to combine the local and the global. And several colleagues already mentioned that. So connecting the multiple scales, but in particular this local and global, and I would say also the translocal, that is different than the global. So the local, the translocal, and the global, and the ability to connect that. And I think that's why it's so relevant that we have colleagues, we have had colleagues and they're still here from the UN system and other multilateral agencies. That's fundamental. And finally, of course, linked to that, the multi-actoral, multi-sectorial character of those dialogues and those experiences, and the need to maintain that moving forward. We know that there are very few spaces, systematic spaces, democratic spaces that actually allow us to be together in the same room on equal footing and having like honest discussions and learning together. So several things that are already part of that, the outcomes of those discussions, and they're also included in the Decalogue that we think is a very strong document and forward-looking document. I just want to highlight a few points because probably have just 1 more minute left. But the key message of leaving no one behind and leaving no place behind that we know is also linked with the SDGs and the new urban agenda. And I want to emphasize that. Please keep in mind also the new urban agenda. And that means basically putting people at the center, right? And putting people at the center means putting dignity, autonomy, and well-being at the center. And for that, we have very concrete tools on how to do that. And a human rights approach that is highlighted in all these documents, and starting taking care of people in most vulnerable situations. Also the integrality and the holistic approach to the everyday life, that we cannot disconnect things and rights and needs in everyday life. The fundamental issue of the need of an intersectional approach to think, to see different situations, to see different realities among different groups, and the relevance of difference within inequalities and so on. And the key of the proximity or the territorial approach to all these that previous colleagues already mentioned. So the centrality of care, the centrality of the commons, and the centrality of the co-creation and co-management of all these things, right? So basically some key points or key approaches into this. And we know there are several topics, right? And we already mentioned housing, transportation, public services, and so on, so forth. So I think for us, it will be important to look at some overarching topics and principles. And some of those will be probably 5 that we can discuss. But one is the decommodification of all these basic needs and rights and services, right? Decommodification meaning that we cannot see them as commodities, as things that only people being able to pay for them will access them, including, of course, health and other things that were mentioned before. The second one, the social function of land and property. And we saw that being applied in the middle of this crisis, in the case of taking vacant hotel rooms and vacant places to actually home homeless people and so on. The social function of property. The third one is the social and solidarity economy, key for the pandemic and key for the recovery phase, of course. And this is crucial because we know that private companies and corporate transnational companies are actually making a lot of money among this crisis, right? So huge gaps and huge inequalities growing in the middle of the pandemic. And we need to address that. So while the public sector is getting in more depth and more problems with the budget, the public budget, we have private companies making a lot of money.
Lorena.
Yeah, finish. The city and countryside, this is the number 4 one, a city and countryside or territorial approach, a regional approach to economies and social metabolic relationships that's crucial for our cities and territories. And finally, the co-responsibility and co-management of public policies. And in this in particular, highlighting the public community or public social partnerships to address all these different issues. Sorry for taking so much time. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Do not apologize. We need to apologize for having so many people in such a little time. But the reality is that we needed to do this together. Otherwise, we would not manage to shape the future steps as we wanted to do. So, as I said, we've got Vasu now, then Barbara, and then Billy, and then I will ask Octavi to provide a little bit of feedback, just very briefly, on what we have heard, so that it inspires the next round. Vasu, director of Accord, a very important partner for us in the whole intergenerational and peacemaking agenda.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and thank you to UCLG, UN Habitat, and Metropolis. As you know, Emilia, we are focusing on managing conflict in cities, and part of the intergenerational dialogues is an attempt to manage conflict in cities. Now, if we look at COVID and the post-COVID period, COVID is a health crisis, and we all know now that COVID as a health crisis has precipitated an economic crisis, and we are currently witnessing that economic crisis precipitating a conflict and security crisis across the world. And we do know that we are not handling those crises very well. This is across the world again. In that respect, what are we doing? We have signed an agreement, I think 3 weeks ago now, with UCLG Africa to assist cities all across Africa to manage their conflicts better, because our own prognosis is that the theater of conflict across the world will move to urban areas. And particularly in Africa, we are seeing a resurgence and a proliferation of conflicts in cities. So we will be working with UCLG Africa. Let me also say then that by 2100, we all know that approximately 85% of the 9 billion people on the planet at the time will be living in cities. That's a staggering 7.5 billion people, with Lagos in Nigeria moving from a population of 15 million in 2020 to almost 90 million by 2100. I mean, you can imagine just the space in Lagos with all the chaos we see even today. now adding 90 billion people to the city. Now, we know from our experience that conflict is inevitable, that it is a necessary means for social change, and that we need to know how to mitigate it. We also know that because of this inevitability of conflict, imagining a utopia is imagining the impossible. But we also know that not managing conflict constructively will lead to a dystopia, something we do not want to imagine into reality. And this is one to propose, Emilia, a new word to imagine the cities of the future, not an impossible utopia, not an undesirable dystopia, but what I will call a realistic citopia, C-I-T-O-P-I-A, where we imagine and actively work towards cities based on tolerance, on coexistence, on respect for rights of others, on being a responsible citizen. So let us together, if we ask what are we going to do together, let us together imagine a citopia of peace cities. And I think what we should do as part of this live learning experiences is to establish a task team to see how we can share experiences across the world about how we are better managing conflict in different cities. Because right now we see many experiences, whether it's Black Lives Matter in the US, whether it is the protest in Paris, whether it is in Hong Kong, or whether here in South Africa where I am, we all have differing experiences and we're all handling it badly. So we should share those experiences and see where we can have good lessons. Thank you very much, Emilia.
Thank you very much. That's an interesting task, team, to define the citopia. And maybe Aromar can then come in later on with his interurban system. You seem to be going to the same place. And I think that can really be interesting for our work together. So Barbara Hotman is the author of Safe Community of Opportunity Tool, also in this realm of safety, conflict. Barbara, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I won't use the full 3 minutes because there's so much wisdom in the room, but I wanted to say there are two things that I think are really important to this discussion. The first is that we need to use this opportunity to apply sectoral lenses to indicators for this work, and then to find the synergy between those lenses. So I think particularly where we're talking about the big issues of climate conflict, food security and safety at a local level, we need to be looking at this from a multi-sectoral perspective, and we need to be agreeing indicators across all tiers of government, but where, as was said earlier, local government is where we measure the impact of these indicators. And I think this is a huge opportunity for that. And the second is that we should be using communication not just to report, but as a tool for transparency and inclusion. And I think that we underuse communication in that way. We should be using global messages at local level to have people understand local governance processes, understand how they can be inclusive, and where we promote the idea that everybody should be useful in achieving what we aim to achieve. So we give agency, we allow the agency of everybody in our environments to participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very efficient indeed. Thank you, Barbara, for this, very useful inputs indeed. We will need to figure out together how we can shape that, these indicators issue that you were raising, but noted. Billy, so Billy Cobbett, Director of Cities Alliance, and then Octavia and Lucy maybe to provide feedback from a network of local governments perspective. Billy, 3 minutes.
Thanks, Emilia. And since we've all been on Zoom for the last 6 months, I want to say that the LLE stands out. So congratulations to you, Maimuna, and to Octavi. And particularly congratulations for the Decalogue. We find this is a very valuable, insightful document. And of course, we welcome the emphasis in particular on the most vulnerable, the migrants, the informal, the women, etc. So against that background and cutting to the chase, what we understand is that our known and existing priorities have been made raw by COVID, but they have been re-emphasized and confirmed. There was no surprises. Everything we've been saying is proven, but worse through the health crisis. And so I think UCLG's role here and organized local and regional government is to begin the process and to encourage the process of rethinking the city, as was previously stated. And of course, rethinking means resharing, because our cities are not shared. So the first principle is it has to be the whole city, and it has to be all citizens. Easy to say, very seldom achieved. And this means, and very practically, the future success of our cities will require them to be physically restructured, particularly in urban poor areas. You cannot put in place infrastructure on top of the existing layouts. So rethinking spatially, which brings into play access, services, and of course, opportunity. And these are absolute preconditions for a new approach to the urban environment. But again, this is not a one-off event. We've got to make sure that this COVID-19 kicks this process into action. So the first is about the physical space. The second is about the space, and this is the role of local governments, creating the space for something between transformative dialogue, engagement, and in reality, negotiations, because the interests within a city are not all the same, other than they share the city. And this means engaging with, in a very structured way, the residents, the citizens, and the private sector. And I think the facilitative role of local government, the public authority here is essential. But I really want to, for the co-creation that UCLG always talks about, and which is the right language. But I want to add a rider to this, and I want to really stress the importance. And really, I'm talking to our international friends like myself as much as possible, of stress the use of local and regional skills, local and regional capacity, and build local and regional institutions. We've been saying it forever. We have to turn that into real practice, because without local institutions, our cities and the governance that they give rise to can't survive. And this will help address the trust deficit. And then, of course, there's the leadership role for international organizations like UCLG and Metropolis in providing both the pressure and the support, the guidelines, to help those local governments, those cities that want to take this forward, to demonstrate the possibility of real learning between cities, bringing in new players, but all of us around you, we will mobilize the support, because ultimately, this is going to be done at the local level, city by city. And getting that going as a movement, I think, would be a wonderful outcome of this dialogue and the Decalogue. And well done to you again.
Well, let us hope that is well done to all of us together, because we really need to walk the talk now. We cannot give us a pretext that we cannot go into the room, or that no. This time we are all here. We have the same opportunity, and I think it is about these transformational actions that we need to put our heads together around. I think we know. You were saying, Billy. We know what we need to do, but now it's about how do we team up together? How do we actually transform the partnership? Octavi, something new, surprising, or something that you really want to hold on to? A brief comment on this round?
I'm not sure it will be new or not, but what I've seen is a progress. A progress since, I mean, maybe it seems obvious, but sometimes the obvious things is the things that we don't realize. Is that for a while, of course, we've been championing all these discussions of these topics from the local government's perspective and the networks, championing everything always by UCLG and the Global Task Force. And sometimes we've been exchanging with other organizations and the civil society organizations and the other way around. But we have not really created a structural space. We can really build trust and work together. I mean, I said we have had a little bit of a process in this sense. When you in Durban, in the World Council of UCLG, we started with the different halls and we started to open discussion, and UCLG started with this dimension of cities are listening. And what we're saying is true, that the pandemic especially has put the pressure and the focus on local governments, communities, and civil society organizations. And what I'm hearing today is if there can be certain change or transformations, that can only happen from the base and working together, local governments, cities, and civil society organizations. And then people have been identifying throughout the interventions kind of different areas. Of course, it's communications, policy, developing joint policy, joint advocacy, and as well the issue of developing transformative projects on the field. Transformative projects that will introduce structural changes in what's happening. And I like it what I think Lorena Zárate said, and I think to a certain extent, it summarizes some of the issues that came up in these previous discussions, is we need to handle and really tackle this triangle between rights, needs, and services at local level, because they go hand by hand. We cannot talk about services and service delivery if we don't talk about rights. But of course, we cannot talk rights if we don't take into account needs. So I think this is an area we could explore. And the other thing that everybody thinks highlighting is the impact that this pandemic has had in the local governance structures and the way that local governments are working with other actors and with all the different levels of government. So what I'm feeling, I'm sensing is there's a sense of building a community, a large community of actors to think the transformations that we need.
Yeah, I have that sense as well, but we need to go a step further and make our organizations fit for purpose in terms of defining, maybe, I don't know how we need to call them, programas, experimentos, laboratorios, no sé qué nombre darles, ¿no? Pero creo que es muy importante efectivamente pensar en los mecanismos, en la metodología ahora. Vamos a ver si lo podemos lograr. And I'm going back to Lucy. Lucy Slack, she's the deputy director, the deputy secretary general, in fact, of the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, a very active member of our global task force. Lucy, do you think we are ready as networks to actually include the views of all of these stakeholders? And what would be the next steps that you see?
Thanks very much, Emilia, and thanks for the opportunity to join this discussion. I think it's been an incredibly kind of rich reflection, and I think it also reflects very much the views that we're finding are coming forward also from the kind of CLGF membership, which in many cases is shared, obviously, with that of UCLG and Metropolis. I was going to say a little bit about the context, but I think most of the things that everybody has said have kind of really covered off those things. I think if I could pick up on sort of 4 things, I think one is that it's very, very clear that COVID is happening at the same time as other crises haven't gone away. We're still dealing with climate change. We're still dealing with issues of rapid urbanization, which is a major challenge for cities and local governments. None of that has gone away. We're still dealing with natural disasters, etc., and that's definitely impacting heavily on local government. But I think what COVID has done is really demonstrated the role that local government can play when it's kind of like looked to as that sort of actor, if you like, in society. So I think we have a moment, and I think the way in which this whole process and the Decalogue is kind of capturing that moment is really important. But I think one of the things I would say is I don't think that we're there yet, so I don't think we can take our foot off the advocacy pedal. So I know we have to think, what do we do next? But I don't want us to do that at the expense of taking our foot off the advocacy pedal, because I think that is really crucially important. And I would say particularly around the whole question of resourcing local government and cities as well, because I think that you know, many of our members are very concerned about the impact of the economic crisis, obviously on citizens, but also longer term on the health and the future and the viability of local government and local government being able to perform its kind of core role and its core function. So I think that's critically important. And I think that opens up the point that Octavia and others were making about the importance of us including the private sector as one of those pillars that we're working with at the city level, but also at a wider kind of policy level. So with our central governments, when we're looking at policies around enabling and empowering local government. I think I would also kind of add to that the need to really make sure we keep our mayors front and center, and really make sure that we strengthen both the political leadership capacity at the local level, but also think about, you know, creating cities that are places where people can build a career and want to work, so that we can get the kind of services that we want in this new cityscape that we're talking about trying to create. I think that's crucially important. And then I think coming from some of our discussions has been this wider challenge around how we make multi-level governance a reality. And that's, yes, the multi-sectoral that somebody mentioned earlier, but also how do we build better relationships between cities and central government and all of the ministries that cities have to kind of like relate to, and how do we make sure that cities are seen as that kind of core state actor and are empowered to do the work that they need to be doing. And I think I would totally agree with the point that Billy made in terms of making sure that we build local institutions and we work to strengthen our membership to be able to take these things forward. But finally, I would add one other thing, which I think as a global task force and as a group of stakeholders in this space, we need to be thinking about. One is we need to really reach out, I think, to the academic community, to the research community, so that we've got a strong evidence base for what we're saying. You know, we've all spoken to our members, we've got lots of ad hoc kind of anecdotal experiences. They're very, very rich, but how can we really genuinely learn the lessons from them and have the kind of evidence? And it brings me to my sort of final point, which is I think we also have to make a strong case to donors to see cities and to think about urbanization, because I think often donors are not in that space, and we need to be working with them to kind of create the cities of the future. So they would be kind of like my main reflections, and just really to say that I think there's great scope for us to kind of continue to build the Global Task Force Network kind of in this direction, both of advocacy and of delivery.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lucy. I think it's important to realize that, I mean, what we can do together cannot, it needs to complement what many of us are doing already. It needs to transform some of what we are doing as well. I think that some of our advocacy needs to change.
I agree.
And there is a reason why the advocacy that we are not doing is not reaching the right places. I mean, sometimes it's lack of political will, and we need to be, you know, open about this. To my great frustration, the declaration for the celebration or commemoration of the anniversary of the 25th anniversary of the United Nations makes reference to parliamentarians, but not to local governments or mayors, or you know, and you know, I don't understand why in all the other documents they talk about the local level. I mean, that non-reference escapes my understanding. And so there must be something that we are not doing right. There might also be something that we are not doing together, and there might be a reality of a political reality out there. But I very much agree that we shouldn't understand this as stopping doing some of that advocacy, but maybe transforming that advocacy. And I hope that those joint communications that Mohammed was referring to, I think could really help in that trend. So for the next block, I would invite Victor Pineda to take the floor, and then followed by Adriana Hallen, then Julian, and then Adam. And as a comment, if we could have the colleagues of CIAN, that would be great. So I'm starting with you, Víctor. Tienes la palabra, compañero. Qué bueno verte. Bienvenido.
Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with so many friends and leaders that are actively engaged in shaping the future of our cities. When Amelia reminds us that cities are listening, she really is creating for us the first global platform to really move things forward. And I've been delighted to work with her and with Maimouna Sharif very closely on the issue of people with disabilities, older persons, and really thinking about how this crisis has given us both an evident set of realities that have become more visible about exclusion, about living on the margins, about the way that we've designed our cities, and about what we can do to change that. So I'm an urban planner. I have been both advising governments around the world and helping to support national, federal, and international efforts to elevate the issue of universal design, access, and inclusion. Not just how it relates to a building, but how it relates to a whole city. And with UCLG, UN Habitat, we have launched during COVID a rapid response effort. We had over 2,000 participants. Many of you were speakers in that webinar series. Over 40 speakers participated. The cities that we spoke with, including our friends in Barcelona, Alaya was one of our speakers, and cities that we spoke with said, okay, we all understand that people with disabilities are high risk. People with disabilities, women with disabilities experience, 4 to 8 times more violence than women without disabilities. People with disabilities are living in poverty and have inequitable outcomes. And so how do we actually look at this pandemic as an inflection point? And how do we come to terms and speak frankly, as Amelia said, is our cities have failed people with disabilities, but it's not just the responsibility of cities, it's a responsibility of the whole ecosystem. It's even in terms of our own beliefs about who is a full citizen, who does deserve rights, or how do we ensure those rights for people that might not be able to see or to hear this Zoom call, this conversation, or move around in a city if there's lack of transportation options. So we listened to the cities, then we convened, and we heard 3 very important things. Number 1, they really wanted to come together to be able to share experiences, and I'm delighted that Amelia has taken a leadership role in helping cities, start to come together around the issue of access inclusion for people with disabilities, and we're supporting that with the network of cities that we're working with as well. When I say me, I mean World Enabled, our partners with the Cities for All global campaign. Number 2, they wanted to know data. What does it look like? What are some of the efforts and initiatives, cities or case studies that have shown both good practices and not so good practices in terms of the COVID response? And third is they wanted tools and guidelines and training so that they can do better. And so I think going forward, I think Billy addressed this for Cities Alliance, Barbara addressed this, our colleagues from Barcelona and from other speakers, Lucy addressed this, because the local level is where the sustainable development goals are going to be won or lost. The voices and the perspectives of a variety of experiences and communities needs to be elevated. And the 3 things that I think we can do, that we're committed to do with all of you, is number 1, to host the convenings of the experts that understand both from a technical perspective and from lived experience how we can make better cities that respond to nearly 550 million people that live in cities that have disabilities, right? It's going to run up, it's going to rise to 1 billion people living in cities with disabilities by 2050. Number two, beyond the convenings and finding communities, let's develop better knowledge. Let's work with the leading academic universities. And we're working with University of California, Berkeley, where I teach, with UCLG, with American universities, with the Catholic University in Chile and others, to really figure out what they're learning about building inclusive and accessible cities and get the data so that it can be shared, open data access to people with disabilities that too often are data deserts. And we're working actually on an app over this year to develop reporting mechanisms for people with disabilities to actually generate that data of exclusion or inclusion in cities. And the final thing is, after we have the convenings, we're able to develop the data and collect it on an open platform, is to really dive deeper in the technical assistance and in the training, because all of this shift to the new normal is all about relearning, the systems that we've built, like reimagining them, developing new processes, developing new governance frameworks, developing new accountability measures. So those are the three things that I feel is our priority for us to move forward. Continue convening specialized groups and specialized conversations that leverage networks of networks. Number two, develop data so that those networks of networks can both feed in and disseminate that specialized knowledge. And then number three is develop practical tools that these various networks.
Second, Victor, medio segundo.
That's it. Those three. Thank you so much, Amelia.
No, thank you, Victor. One thing that this better knowledge is coming out very, very, very strongly together with the training that might not be traditional training. That is also something that we need to think about. My sense is, if we want to work on this utopia that Basu was bringing to the table to feed into this interurban system that is already a reality, in fact, we will need to experiment with one specific issue that we treat not in a sectoral manner, and that we all contribute to. I think that is our big challenge there. Otherwise, we are going to go back to our little spots, and we will talk on specialized things. But I think some very robust ideas are shaping, and I hope we can make co-create strong proposals around this. Adriana, you've been with us in quite a few of these already. So do you see progress here, and what do you want to bring to us?
Sure, thank you so much, Emilia, and thanks to all. Adriana speaking from Habitat International Coalition. Well, again, I cannot go ahead before saying again a big thanks to Emilia, Octavi, Maimuna, to everyone behind this process, because we have to, as civil society organizations, we are witnessing a real reduction of the spaces, international spaces, in which the voices of civil society are heard, just like local authorities are heard. And I think that having this space at the center of a discussion driven by local and regional authorities has been extraordinarily bold and useful for us, and we are grateful for that. Very briefly, because there are too many fantastic people that I want to hear too, so just a few reflections from all the important things that have been said. If I think about the road so far, I feel that there are two key things that we have to nurture and celebrate that have come out of this process. One is, of course, this greater awareness about the fact that COVID in fact, manifested pre-existing challenges around urban inequality, just to put it in simple terms. However, I think that some others said that before, we have to perhaps think not just only of the manifestation of pre-existing challenges being enhanced or, by the COVID condition, but of two further realizations that I think we are, around which we are gaining greater awareness. One is the fact that we live, urbanization is happening under risk. We are witnessing an era of urbanization and urban change on risk, under risk. And that means risk is systemic. Whether we call it COVID-19, whether we call it the next name of the next pandemic, whether we call it climate change and so on, risk is systemic, and we have to think completely differently the way we have been running, using, managing, and governing cities. The second thing to remember, and Lorena put this very nicely, Lorena Zárate, is that this is also taking us not just to an issue of managing cities, planning cities, but this is a human right issue. We are talking about not just a disease, we are talking about human rights being violated or defended, both in the actions sometimes that are taken in response to COVID, which can work both ways. Now, the second important aspect I think that comes to all this is that we have also become, we have a greater realization of the muscle that not only I think definitely local authorities, but also local authorities and civil society organizations have and can have together. And I think that this is quite new because we are much more used to see in many cases a confrontationist way of working, a mistrust in many relations and so on. So I think that there are important elements that need to go deepened in this realization that cities are, if you wish, the product of social and political dialogue, but also collective action. Many of you said before, the change is not going to happen alone by, through the hands of local and regional governments, but it has to be in collaboration with civil society. So if we say that localizing and democratizing this transformation, the type of transformation that we are discussing is the key task that brings us together today, I really like the way in which Billy Cobbett put it. This resharing of the city. I think that, again, if we want, of course, it has to do with mobility, with sanitation, with housing, you name it. It's multifaceted. But perhaps I just want to put three ideas very, very briefly on the where do we start or the how do we talk, how do we walk the talk as was mentioned before. I think that the first one is, the first thing that we need to do is we need to be aware that there is a massive and a very important level of social mobilization, bringing many organizations, again, local and regional governments, civil society, donors, think tanks, universities, and so on, rethinking about the city, but we cannot take that movement for granted. So we need to think about very specific ways of deepening and expanding this movement. And I think that we need to become, in a way, a movement. So that is more than just a social movement. Can we think about a movement of progressive municipalism? There is something around that we need to think. How does it look? How do we work for that? The second thing I think is that we need to continue, many talk about the relearning. And it's true that what we see is the emergence of new visions, of new ways of thinking about cities and conveying change, and a lot of information, a lot of documentation coming around, I mean, with lots of useful efforts from every organization in the room and beyond the room. But we need to be aware also of the fact that we can somehow drown, in this information. So for me, a key challenge is how do we move to make all this information, all these discussions, all this documentation into something that is really actionable knowledge, that allows us to say something that was mentioned before, to monitor the way we are trying to pursue change, the impacts we're having, the what we are doing wrong, the what we need to do differently, the what we need to do again that we stop doing, and so on. So there is something huge around actionable knowledge, different from just documenting. The third issue, I think, has to do with bringing to this fora those who are not here. or have not been part of this discussion. And this is essential because in many cases, you know, otherwise we find that we gain momentum, we expand the room, the walls of the room become, you know, further away from each other, but there is a point where we just talk to each other. And I feel, sorry, I will stop in a second. And I think that, you know, that has to do with the advocacy work that, you know, Lucy and others were highlighting before. We need to continue that advocacy work. We need to make room in the United Nations system for these messages and again and for the obvious absences sometimes in this dialogue to, you know, just not to happen, not to continue happen. And my last point has to do with the resourcing. I think that the resourcing, I mean, we cannot think about transformative action without thinking about a complete resourcing. And resourcing, of course, has to do with including and having a very active discussion with donors. I mean, cities and urbanization have almost come completely out of the agenda of donors across the world. This is outrageous. This wasn't the situation in the 90s, but that's the case today, but also with national states and many more. So we need to think about resources in a very different way. We need to discuss about resources around discussions that are going to be very difficult. Yeah, really talk about negotiation, and there is no possibility of resharing the city unless we challenge the forces that are in many ways working against a resharing of the city. I stop here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Adriana. Yeah, we were saying it before. I mean, there is an issue of political will. There is an issue also of spaces that are narrowing in many ways. Some of the narratives that we are building together, and this is an introduction to the next speaker, Julian Simon, has been suffering for a very big backlash from the situation around the pandemic. I mean, we are promoting one type of narrative around migration, and I think Billy will recognize that. But the very first thing that happens that puts our societies in danger, we close the borders. We close the borders even within our own countries. Borders that do not exist, we create them, right? So I mean, this is not a simple thing, and it will remain a matter of negotiation. I think something that you talked about is very important. This actionable knowledge that we need to produce together will be very relevant. I think we need to develop like a set of criteria that our joint forces would need to meet. Not, I mean, acknowledging that we will not be able to do it all. So we've got Julian Simon from ICMPD, an organization that works with us on migration issues, and in particular around the project in the Mediterranean, a very hot spot in the world in relation to this, but not the only one, unfortunately. Julian, your on this conversation.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and thank you very much for inviting me to join this group. Very good initiative. Kudos on what you are launching here. Yes, I will be very short when it comes to the points I want to raise. You anticipated that I would be speaking about the narratives. You know me too well already. But it is indeed a very important matter, and I think a matter where cities can have a very strong voice and therefore on this basis influence the role they would play in shaping migration policies, which right now is too limited. The role that cities have in shaping migration policies, it's almost exclusively an area which is determined by the national level and the international frameworks. We talked about cities as absolutely crucial actors to shape a better future. I would say a better reality. When we talk about when we think about the amount of people living in cities nowadays, and we picture if we even can picture the staggering figures provided by the colleague on the potential population of Lagos, for instance, in Africa by the end of the century, if anyone can picture that, this is something which again illustrates the importance of cities having a strong voice in shaping policies which impacts them immediately. The COVID-19 basically has created the biggest mass movement ever, and then followed up almost immediately by the biggest mobility shutdown of all time. The interesting thing is that when it comes to the perception of migration and the phenomenon and where the threats were located, it's mostly vulnerable populations, migrant populations who have been pointed finger at. while the reality of the spread of the COVID-19 is that actually it's people who benefit mostly of high level of mobility who have been contributing to spreading it, not really migrant populations who in general, once they have moved to the destination where they reside temporarily or permanently, would have a more of a sedentary, let's say, profile. So this situation is basically completely redefining what we call the migration and security nexus, which in the past was very much about the type of threats that movements of people would pose to the borders and so on and so forth. We are entering basically in a new age where biosecurity policy concerns are going to be at the heart of the way we are looking at securing these borders and securing or better regulating migration. At the same time, migrant populations have been absolutely essential in maintaining the very most important services that a number of people have been able to benefit from during this very delicate period that we have been living and we continue to live. The fact is that particularly since the rebound recently, this issue of better managing this situation with regard to migration has come to the core of the debate on migration matter. Very importantly in this regard, we need to also imagine the worst. What if is just a warning for a far more lethal pandemic in the future? What would be the impact of it? We've seen recently that with the reopening of borders and loosening of measures, the disease itself, the pandemic, has basically rebounded quite dramatically. So the migration reality basically are lived mostly in the cities. This is where the population and the cities benefit from what migration and migrant populations are bringing, where it is the most palpable, if you will. Yet at the same time, the migration policies are elaborated to a certain or to a great extent by actors, stakeholders, which do not properly include cities. So when it comes to the way migration is perceived, what we can do, what cities perhaps can do, is to very proactively contribute to rebalancing this narrative. It's already the case. ICMPD together with UCLG is part of the working group of the Global Forum on Migration and Development on narratives on migration, which is a very important global work which is being undertaken in order to map out everything which is being done and can help balancing this narrative of migration. But in general, what we need to do is to move away from the, migration policies are defined by migration perceptions rather than migration realities, unfortunately. And these migration perceptions, in turn, are particularly shaped at national level, while the migration realities are lived at local level. So having a stronger voice is being also more visible. The Vice Mayor of Barcelona was pointing out to the effort in terms of communication which needs to be undertaken. And I think this is particularly an area where cities can have a dramatic impact, can share the experience of the positives related to narrative, can help steer away, move beyond basically the association of migration with problems, migration with vulnerabilities, migration with threats, and share rather on migration is about also benefits, is an asset to the development of cities. A greater visibility, a more proactive communication would also help basically position cities so that governments at national levels cannot afford not to engage city more actively in shaping migration policies. In this regard, and just to conclude, with regard to the work we've been doing together, I really like the catchy name of Cities Are Listening. And in order to bring this migration reality into the next stage, I would say, I was imagining in my head, what about picturing it as a long-term action plan with following cities are listening, cities are speaking, cities are talking, and cities are acting. And sharing that with a very ambitious campaign, communication campaign, which can go far beyond the issue of migration. Obviously, I focus on the issue of narratives on migration, but can go far beyond that. And basically here, something coordinated from the local to the regional to the global. Being present on there, communicating there will help having a stronger influence. Thank you very much, Emilia.
Thanks, Julian. I think what this group needs also to think about whether these convictions that we have, each of us in our area of work, are true for those that we are speaking on behalf of, for those that are also living in the cities, but also shaping the cities. And in the particular case of migration, I think there is a very important joint work that we will need to do, because while from an international perspective, we might think that local and regional governments can change the narrative, I am convinced they are doing it, but they are also paying a very high political price for this. And so I think, and this is something that the Vice Mayor of Barcelona also pointed out. So we need to think how we can accompany this work and how we can make sure that these are not only messages by the elected officials, but also joint messages by the communities. And this is an area that we still need to work on. Aromar, an Ubuntu advisor and fighting COVID in India. I know you have been very busy, and I'm delighted to have you with us. Our interurban system genius, Aromar, the floor is yours. Where do you see us going? Have we made some progress?
Thank you, Emilia. So first, congratulations to you, to Octavi, to Maimona's not here, for the makeover post Tangier. I mean, you know, the website and looks fantastic. You know, we've been looking for this for a long time. So I think that's really wonderful. And I especially appreciate that the first tag on it is women's leadership. That's really speaks to what's happening within the movement, and certainly during COVID. So that's really wonderful. The only thing is, I think we just heard just now, we need to start shifting the hashtags. So the hashtag started off with cities are listening. Now it's gone to beyond the outbreak. I think we have to step up a little bit and talk about what we're actually doing. So it is really, if you look at least in our parts of the world and many other parts, it really is cities are the ones who are doing the doing. So I think the hashtag should move to cities are building a post-COVID future. I mean, let's not sort of, you know, confuse the matter here. This is where it's actually happening on the ground. The pain is being felt, the responses are being felt, the coming together is happening in urban areas and communities across the world. So I think that shift is quite important. So in some senses, what COVID has taught us is, it's not only, you know, about what we'd like to be, but we really have to seize the narrative. And not only seize the narrative, I think we have to, you know, accelerate our ambition. So I was a little surprised to hear, and it's wonderful that, you know, you're starting a massive open online course, but an open online course which has 1,000 people, a few thousand people, come on, for UCLG, that's like, you know, that's 1/100th the way you should be. And I can say that with some sort of, you know, some basis. The little course that we run on sustainable cities that has many of you on it has 35,000 people on it who registered for it. So, I mean, UCLG and the rest of the world should be doing 350,000. I mean, I'm sure we have more elected officials, etc. So I think the thing is not only to seize narrative, but also to expand that. And if you need any help on this, we're very happy to help support this process and take it forward. And it will not, and it should not be on a platform that we build. The reason it's happening is because it's on a large commercial platform. You have to think about new kinds of relationships to deal with that. I mean, you have to deal with that. So that's the first thing. So if you want to seize the narrative, what are the key things I think that may be part of it? The first thing is, this of course is a horrible, you know, health situation. I know we're in the middle of this at the moment. India is going to probably run past the United States pretty soon. So we know exactly what it means. But basically, it's not only an SDG3 storm. This is an SDG, it's almost a perfect SDG storm. It started with 3 on health, but it's touched everything else. It's touched livelihoods, 8, it's touched poverty, it's touched food security in our context. So this is actually propagated through the entire system. And I think that is part of the narrative that is very important for local governments to seize, because we're the people who are dealing with it in an integrated manner. So, you know, to ask the nasty question, who's dealing with this strategically? the answer in most parts of the world is not national governments. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the situation that we have. It is citizens along with local governments, with national governments trying to help or hinder depending on where they are. So I think that is, part of the pivotal shift that's there. But there's something else which is a little contrarian that I'd like to say. And, in a sense, it's our dark secret. So cities do wonderful things. They bring together economic opportunity and a whole range, livelihoods, this, that, the other. But they also do terrible things, and COVID is the proof of that. They concentrate poverty, they concentrate conflict, they concentrate risk, and they concentrate pandemics. So, that's a harsh reality when you're a local government official or a mayor that you deal with. You deal with both things, the great stuff that cities do, which we try and push and, position, et cetera, but also there are horrible things that happen in urban areas. I mean, in India, that's exactly what's happening. Concentration in cities building out now, starting from rich people coming and, infecting cities and now going out to rural areas. So I think the response to that is also important, to stand up and say, we have the solution, we also have the problems. But most of the other actors cannot deal with these together. And that is the power of local government. We know how to deal with that together. It's a balance between the two that's absolutely critical for us to deal with. So having said that, the key thing is, how do we start kind of bringing this process together? And I think the answer to that is relatively simple. It's happening already, in many places across the world. And we haven't spoken about it very clearly, but the first thing I think is cities will lead in post-COVID economic and livelihood recovery. This is the most critical question that people are concerned about at the current point of time, because, if you don't die from COVID, in other places, you will start dying from hunger and lack of livelihoods. And focusing on this sort of so-called new green investment stimulus around affordable housing, upgrading of climate and disaster resilient infrastructure, et cetera, in cities is, I think, the central issue. Because part of the story here, unfortunately, is chasing the money. We have to see where the resources are. So it's not only the crisis that we have today. What we're seeing is, we are seeing the largest economic stimulus in the world, probably since the Second World War. Countries are doing between 1 to 10-15% of GDP, which basically means we're borrowing from two places. We're borrowing from the future, and we're borrowing from local governments, effectively, right? So if we have to rethink universal access to food security, basic urban services, the right to the city, sanitation, clean energy, et cetera, and dealing with informal livelihoods and tenuring, all the things that we know about, we have to confront these two things absolutely, face on and deal with that. So I think, bringing these two things together, the fact that this is a systemic crisis, we know how to deal with it, and they're both positive and sort of negative aspects to that, both in the short, medium, and long run. And finally, we know how to kind of respond by bringing the processes together. But we have to be given the space to be able to act, and the space is both political and fiscal and sort of institutional. I mean, a number of us have been saying you have to build the institutional capacities. I've just spent the last month trying to roll out 1% of GDP stimulus in India, which starts with 100 cities, because that's what the government wants, then goes to 400, and then builds up to another, whatever it is, 7,500 in a phased manner. So I think one has to try and make this possible. And it's centrally about local government, even though local governments are deeply disempowered in South Asia. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Aromar. We'll need concrete proposals around some of these areas that you have mentioned. I think it is true that we need to step up the level of engagement that we expect when we produce knowledge materials and training materials. And that is something that we will only achieve together, and that developing our own things is not the way to go. So I think we need things that we develop together. I would be very happy to explore also with Octavia and colleagues the hashtag issue, but there has been thinking around this, and so I need new thinking. Basically, you need to convince us. So send us things so that it is really strong, and we will really let us. We need to charm each other. Let us put that into a collective pot and see what comes up with. But I think you are right in giving a stronger message about the doing part. I think this is, yeah, that's the part that I think we need to really work out. Okay, last round. First, some reactions from Luz in Bogota. Do you identify with some of the things that are being said? When I was listening to Aromar, so convinced that cities were going to lead the recovery, this is not what I sense from my membership. I think my membership is extremely concerned about what they are going to be able to do with the recovery. They want to lead the recovery. They are not being given the tools at all to do that. So there is a tension there between the political level and the political will and the capacities that are being given. I don't know, Luz, how you are looking into this. Brief remarks, please.
No, thank you very much, Emilia, Octavi, and Maimuna for this conversation. We relate very much to what Barcelona said. A lot. I mean, we need support in the political struggle we have to face to make the transformations we need. I mean, we talk a lot about the new reality, the new world, but it requires lots of transformations, lots of local changes. And these changes also require a lot of support. And we are facing right now a time of evidence-based policy making, and we are policymakers, and evidence comes from different sources. One source is data, one source are studies and surveys and these kind of instruments, but evidence comes also from what happened in other parts of the world, in other cities. So yes, it's true, there is a lot what we've learned about each other in this life learning experience project, and I mean, this has been amazing. But the house, and you mentioned that the house is at the heart of what we should discuss and act now. And I would outline, and this is, I mean, I had prepared a short statement about that, but the main idea is that we need your support, we need your inputs to provide evidence for the political process, for the local political process. This is very complex. We are facing a very divided moment. We are polarized mostly everywhere in the world. And beyond the polarization, we need to provide some kind of evidence for the nature of change we want to introduce. So in very short words, I would ask you to provide that kind of evidence, to work a lot in the production of knowledge. It's not just about circulating or helping circulate good practices and what works in one context, but to make perhaps comparative studies, comparative analysis that provide evidence to especially the political process. Thank you.
Thank you, Luz. A very, very clear message. And Sian, our colleague Shiki, any comments on this before the very last round?
Thank you, Emilia. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me for this session. At present, the COVID-19 is still raging around the world since the international community is facing severe difficulties and challenges. Global epidemic prevention and control is relevant to not only human health, but also world prosperity. Mankind is a community with a shared future. That we are closely connected when it comes to preventing the spread of the virus and the recovery. I hope that we could pay attention to the following three aspects. First, the solidarity. As many other speakers mentioned, solidarity is very, very important right now. I won't repeat that, but the solidarity should be the first thing we need to concern. During the LLE session, UCLG has united with local governments to overcome difficulties and spread local government strategies to the world, making outstanding contributions to epidemic prevention and control, and protest the rights and interests of vulnerable groups and citizens. Second, I should say culture. Emphasize culture as the fourth pillar of the sustainable development. The roots behind the conflicts between countries and regions are cultural differences and interest demands. As mentioned in the Decalogue for the COVID-19 aftermath, culture is the antidote for the secondary effects. That's exchanges and communications between different cultures and crucial to solving the current problems the world we are facing with. The third one is food. Whenever a global crisis breaks out, the secondary crisis may affect us for a longer time on a larger scale. So in 2020, affected by the COVID-19, natural disasters, supply chain, and other issues, food may become a new challenges we're about to face. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, there are 1.6 billion tons of food are wasted every year across the world, of which 1.3 billion tons are inedible. Meanwhile, there are 820 million people around the world facing hunger, roughly equivalent to 1 in 9. So a few months ago, actually many Chinese cities, including Xi'an, once again carried out continuously and extensive publicity to reject the food waste. Food waste and food supply should arouse widespread concern. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. UCLG should continue to play an active role to enhance understanding among people of different nationalities, cultures, and beliefs, weaken differences, and promote SDGs and guidance directing local governments. Embracing the future mankind, we shall always put the interests of people first, build more open and inclusive city, and establish more resilient cities so as to making contributions to the well-being of people. Thank you very much, Emilia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Xi'an, always very loyal to this cause of culture as part of that development that we need to understand, and from bringing the issue of food, which is also very related to the circular and solidarity economy that was introduced by Lorena Zarate. I certainly think that this is it's going to become very critical in the future, and it's a file that we have started working on, but we will need to emphasize. Octavio, you had a comment on this round before we go to the next one.
Yes, thank you, Emilia. I don't have the answer for if we need or not a new hashtag, as Aroma was proposing, but I think something came from the different participants in this second round, which I think is important to highlight it again, is this new process that we are witnessing. On the one hand, and they have been accelerated because of the pandemic, on the one hand, spaces are narrowing, but at the same time, local governments have been acting more than ever and providing solutions, even when national governments were not able to provide clear solutions or proposals. And cities were sometimes developing their own policies, their own initiative, because they had to, they had no other option. So I think this process is a kind of overarching process or moment we are witnessing that spaces are narrowing, but at the same time, we are acting more and more. Just wanted to highlight that.
Yes, somehow this is about what Adriana is saying also in the chat that and Aroma was also introducing it. We need to be able to show the progress that we are making also throughout the hashtag. I agree. Let us look into that. Okay, for this last round, we've got France, we've got Anna, Daria, and then the city perspective would come in from Puben. I see other participants there, so if we are not too late, I certainly will try to give the floor to everybody. Frans van der Schuren, I say it Opzang Netherlands, but I don't know if it is Dutch, in fact, is Director of Urban Safety of the Universidad Alberto Hurtado. Franz, a ti la palabra.
Muchísimas gracias, Emilia. Me voy a permitir de hablar castellano, rompiendo un poco la tradición de los otros oradores. Yo quiero simplemente insistir sobre dos aspectos. Uno, yo hablo desde la academia, pero también desde la Red Global de Ciudad Más Segura de ONU Habitat. Creo que una primera urgencia, si queremos tener herramienta concreta a nivel de ciudad para actuar frente a la post-coronavirus y el coronavirus también, es de tener gobiernos que actúen, gobierno local que actúan sobre la base de un enfoque de seguridad humana. Es decir, que sean capaces de trabajar transversalmente la salud, la seguridad, la educación, la promoción de la actividad económica, los espacios públicos, lo que sea, todas las áreas, y que no continúen a trabajar en forma sectorial. Y sobre eso necesitamos indicador, como decía Bárbara Ortmann, y rápidamente en modelos, porque si continuamos a trabajar en forma fragmentada a nivel municipal, vamos a depender siempre más de los gobiernos regionales o del gobierno nacional, y sin fuerza. Eso es lo que está verificando en mucha parte. Yo creo que ahí hay una unidad, una alianza que hacer con la academia para reflexionar sobre este tipo de problemas. Segundo tema sobre el cual quiero rápidamente insistir, en la línea de lo que digo Vasu Gonden y Lorena Zarate, el derecho a la ciudad, de la utopía, de la resolución de conflicto. Creo que el problema, uno de los problemas fundamentales de nuestra sociedad es la policía. Por lo menos en algunos países, o por lo menos en la región latinoamericana. Es catastrófico la situación actual. Algunos gobiernos van hacia la militarización de la seguridad y otros a la privatización de la seguridad, que ya tiene 3 veces más agentes que la propia policía. Y la policía aparece en crisis, y donde más policía, más violencia hay. Entonces ahí algo no funciona. Entonces, urgente pensar en reforma policial, y sobre eso hay criterios. Hoy día la academia por lo menos ha progresado. Hay criterios que definen lo que es la legitimidad policial en términos de respeto a derechos humanos, en términos de no discriminación, en términos de eficacia policial, que cuidado, nuestras poblaciones continúan a preferir a considerar que el mejor delincuente es el delincuente muerto, lo lamento decir esto brutalmente, y de tener también criterios de legitimidad en términos de expresión de valor democrática. Sí, y sobre eso hay criterios que existen hoy día urgente, como hay derecho a la ciudad, hay derecho a tener nuestra policía. Y hay excelente modelo en este momento de policía municipal en muchas partes del mundo. Y hay también a nivel nacional excelente policía, hay también muy mala. Entonces es urgente, creo que los municipios y las asociaciones estén presentes. Por ejemplo, últimamente han sido mucho más visibles las actividades deportivas, el fútbol, el básquet, en crítica a la actividad policial injusta en el mundo, que la asociación como las nuestras. ¿Sí? Yo creo que es urgente hacer eso, y definir criterios, analizar modelos, comparar, etc. Sobre eso hay muchas cosas. Y eso va junto con una forma que mencionaba muy bien Vasu Gonden, de resolución de conflicto pacífico. Sí, eso es fundamental hoy día, hay que inventar eso. Y hay buenas experiencias en muchos países del mundo, cómo no desarrollar eso, cómo no formar a la gente en esta materia. Yo creo que hay que hacer todo eso, pero con indicador preciso, con difusión de experiencia positiva, o por lo menos de principio, y con posibilidad de aplicación en distintas partes del mundo. O sea, que yo deseo vivamente que la asociación, que el UCLG o Habitat o Metrópolis asuma, y las otras asociaciones asuman estos problemas concretos y proveen herramientas. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Muchas gracias, Franz. Yo creo que es un tema muy importante en el que también creo que tenemos que estimular más el diálogo entre los representantes de los gobiernos locales y el sistema parlamentario. Creo que tenemos efectivamente que desarrollar ese conocimiento. Dices, hay mucho trabajo hecho y hay toda una perspectiva de enfoque de conflicto urbano, que de hecho nosotros estamos trabajando con el Foro de la Paz y de Violencias Urbanas, que ahora ha retomado México después de Madrid, pero creo que nos falta quizás esa conexión con lo legislativo para cambiar algunas cosas. veamos cómo esta iniciativa puede también contribuir y te agradezco mucho y nos gusta mucho poder contar contigo en este trabajo. Paso la palabra ahora y espero que sigamos en castellano. Mira, a Ana Falú, también nuestra asesora Ubuntu.
Hola Emilia, hola Octavi, Madame Maimuna, fantástica reunión. I think I can do it in English also for the other participants. So I think we need to move into action. And I agree with all the people that precede me on the word. And I think that we have an enormous opportunity because even when the centralization of the countries is leading in this pandemia and post-pandemia policies and actions, the local authorities and the metropolitan authorities are the one giving the solutions and responding to the immediate demands and needs of the people. And this is a tension, and we have to stand up in that tension to enhance and to reinforce and to empower the local government and local authorities. I think that the critical word and concept for all this pandemia and post-pandemia is inclusion. Because somebody said in here, and I think I agree, and we all agree, that the pandemic put magnificent glasses on all the inequalities and all the issues and topics we've been debating and talking about during years and decades. And in this inclusion, and this concept of inclusion should consider diversity, the different identities, the intersectionalities. I mean, we need to open and give the complexity of this concept of inclusion to work in the unequal world we are having and in all the impact of the pandemic. I think in that inclusion and inequality, I will put the focus as always on women and diversity, because I think it's central, and somebody said it in Kia, or many of you said, to really mainstream all the local agenda and the metropolitan agenda and the habitat agenda with the gender focus and the gender perspective. And the themes that the pandemic put into this magnificent lens are clear: violence, care work of women, and economic situation, the income, because women are the majority in the informal market. I have many things to comment to you, but I'm not going to do right now. I think we have the opportunities and we have debated on this issue several times, but I want to share with you that we are moving into action. And we are moving into action, at least in Latin America. And one first step we are having is that the leader of the UN Women Agency entity of UN of the United Nations, the leader for Latin America, Maria Noel Baeza, and the leader of Habitat, the Organization of Habitat in Latin America, Elkin Velázquez, are meeting, and they call me also to work together and being the advisor of Maimuna in the advisor group and chairing that group, and being the Ubuntu gender people of Emilia and CCLU, UCLG. I think that we have an opportunity to really build this, what has been said here: indicator, knowledge production, capacity building, and we have the opportunity to really build a regional plan on women and cities linked to the local authorities and the territories where people is living and where the evidence is raised. And we can think in a regional plan for Asia and for Africa in the same line. And this is an opportunity, and I just wanted to share with you, because it will be great if Emilia and Octavie and Madame Maimouna agree that we could push and set in this kind of possibility a good partnership with the coalitions, with the academia, with the networks, yeah? This partnership, we need to move forward into action. And for this is our town hall, I think, yeah? Thank you very much, Emilia, and thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Anna. Indeed, I think that you have raised something very relevant. We will need to work it out in the concrete proposals that we need to exchange. I think it's important to realize that we will need to conceive something global that we need to do together in these series that are coming up. But we could certainly also commit to work together regionally or sectorally to contribute to this global aim. Let us think a bit about that, because our next phase of work could be done in phases. It can also be done in different packages, and we need something that brings us all together at the same time, that shows the kind of synchronization that we have had. So I hope that we can think about that in the coming days, and as we share the next steps in a couple of minutes, I hope I can get your commitment to provide some feedback around these things. Daria from Public Service International. Daria.
Thank you so much, Emilia. Thank you, Octavie and Maimouna, for the opportunity. Yes, Public Services International, so the Global Trade Union Federation of Workers in Local and Regional Governments. Of course, first of all, a few considerations and then a few points for action as you have requested, Emilia. Well, first of all, the pandemic has been a real tragedy for everyone, particularly for frontline workers in health, but also in very many other municipal services, as you know all too well, in water services, trash collection, any kind of frontline service has had its casualty. And this has brought to the fore the key role that public services play. If in the past, as you have said, Emilia, at the beginning, public services have been defunded for a long time and even privatized, today there's a general recognition, and we are pleased to see that even the UN with the COVID in urban areas note, which came out in July, stresses the importance of public services. And we want to commend the work of UCLG, which has been so strongly advocating and continues to advocate so strongly in favor of strong public services. So the declaration that we had was extremely well received by our membership, and it's being used on the ground to really advocate and sometimes together with local authorities demand stronger funding for infrastructure and public services of the future. We've seen altogether that public services are what keep our society and social fabric going and what keeps our civilization as we know it. Still, what is the counter argument is still, on the one hand, you have a lot of strong praise of public services, but then when it comes to financing, the reactions that we hear from central governments and from the international financial institutions are still always the same. It sounds like austerity. So when we also look at the recognition that public service workers have had in terms of the importance of their role in keeping people and communities safe, I said there has been a lot of applauses. Of course, the applause is great, the recognition is great, but what is needed is public service workers who have the personal protective equipment to do the job in a way which is not only safe for them, but safe for their family and for the communities they serve. And that for PSI requires a very strong and good dialogue with local government employers, social partnerships, social dialogue, and collective bargaining. And this is also based not only for serving more effectively our communities in a time which is particularly difficult, but also to mold a very strong alliance, and this is a part of the proposals, to advocate for strong public services at a national level in each country, and at a global level with the UN and with all the international financial institutions. So a few concrete asks or proposals. Of course, we have our charter, which sets out
1 minute,
yes,
1 minute, Daria.
a line of action. But I would say that together, local governments and their workers can ask for an overall rejection of all, again, austerity. And what can austerity is going to make the COVID crisis worse? What can we do instead? First of all, ask very strongly that public subsidies to companies are linked to progressive targets, socially and environmentally, and other progressive targets. Then, of course, that we can work together on recovering tax which is lost in tax havens, but that is recovered not only back to central governments, but also channeled back to the territories which host the productive activities of many companies which do not pay back their fair share. And last point, but important point, we know that the social impact of the COVID crisis is causing a huge wave of unemployment, and it's particularly hard where social protection is inefficient, incomplete, or non-existent. So one Italian idea, which comes from central Italy, and the CMR president is certainly aware of that because he comes from the Emilia-Romagna region, is perhaps to revive this concept of territorial pacts for decent employment. I think that it's really a good idea that at a local level, all the stakeholders, the social partners, even the academia and the employers, the private sector, come together and say, take stock of the situation and tell to each other, okay, where do we move from here, because we need to create employment. Thank you so much. And congratulations for this initiative.
Thank you so much, Daria, and thank you always for your commitment. I know that you are starting a new professional path soon, but it's a path that will keep you very close to us, so I'm not concerned. We will not need to miss you. Thank you very much, Daria.
Please, I hope I can still be part of the community. Would be very important. Thank you very much.
You bet. I'm certain you will be, and thank you for this idea. I'm going now to South Africa again, and Puben, the floor is yours from the perspective of Durban. And being very knowledgeable of our learning agenda and our strategic objectives as the UCLG network, how do you feel about what we have shared today?
Hi, Emilia, and thank you to all the colleagues, all protocols observed. The learning exchange has been a huge boost in terms of bringing people together, but also hearing voices that you would ordinarily not hear as local government, and exchanging views. And I think that's very, very important, especially in the crisis that we are at the moment, is that we cannot reinvent the wheel, and therefore having the ability to exchange and interact with like-minded colleagues is definitely a plus, and moving that forward is an even bigger feather in the cap of local government itself. However, I think in some of the issues that we really need to take forward and advocate and stress, and I picked up 6 issues, and the issues that I want to look at is that many cities are currently looking at recovery plans or post-recovery plans, but they are not grounding that in any sort of formal strategy itself. I would like for our network partners in UCLG to actually advocate to the mayors and administrators that our post-recovery plans be rooted or contextualized in either the SDGs or even the New Urban Agenda or even resilient plans itself. The recovery plans give us an opportunity to further entrench SDGs at a municipal level. We should not lose that opportunity. The second point is the pandemic has actually illustrated how fragile local government funding and revenue sources are. So we really need to look at how we diversify our revenue sources, but also rethink the economic model behind cities itself. The third point, and it talks to our economic models, is how we jointly advance social cohesion and economic for just recovery. And I think Vasu touched on that point earlier on as well, is, cities or urban centers are being the centers of conflict. And we're going to see this actually rise if we don't look at the joint advancement of social cohesion and economies itself. The fourth point is, whatever happens in cities actually does not stay in cities. We need to look at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is sound city regional planning. And it's not just looking at the urban center itself, it's looking at our neighbors, cross borders and so forth. How do we actually get them to, or get us to work together much more closer to find solutions itself? The fifth point, and I think it's an interesting point that we haven't really looked at as cities, is how do we start to restore confidence and build confidence with our residents around the safety of living in dense urban settlements post-COVID. That's something that we haven't really considered. Our colleague from the UITP spoke about public transport, but how do we start changing the mindset post-COVID that transport is safe, city is safe, urban spaces are safer, and we can interact? That is something that we really need to look. And also the last point is how do we advance the safety agenda across all realms of the municipality? Those are my 6 points. So effectively, a Twitter version of the 6 points is an SDG-rooted COVID recovery plan, diversified economic models and revenue streams, joint advancements of social cohesion and economy, improved city regional planning, access to core services, restoring confidence within our cities, but not forgetting the safety of citizens across all realms within the city itself. I believe these are the matters that cities actually need assistance on, and will actually gain a lot of understanding, but also provide implementation mechanisms moving forward, arising out of these learning exchanges, but also any sort of new tools or teaching exercises that we may actually develop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Puban. I need to break the news that does not fit in a tweet. It's very long. But I'm very happy this session is being recorded because I'm sure the policy colleagues that are taking notes will need to revisit the recording to get it all. In any case, I have a sense that the campaign or the joint campaigning for certain issues that we are convinced will need defending and need advocating for together. So more than the sum of us, that Mohammed was bringing up as a concrete example, the campaign around public mobility, but it goes beyond that. Might be a very interesting act of work for what we need to do. Look, we are really late. We are half an hour late, but I don't know. I mean, since I have you still here, many of you are still. Is there anyone that wants to provide very quick, efficient comments before we give the next steps? And I see Mehmet Duman, the Secretary General of MEWA. He has not taken the floor yet. Our colleagues from Diputación de Barcelona. But also some of the previous speakers, if you want to make very brief comments that you want to leave with the group, please give me a sign and I will give you the floor. And I don't see any hands, do I? Oh, yes, Javier.
Yes, thank you, Emilia. Javier Vázquez from the Office of the Special Envoy, and greetings from Maria Soledad. She couldn't be with us, but I'm representing her. So very briefly, I would like to share with you the 4 points that are a priority for the Special Envoy. Number one is to mainstream accessibility as a human rights issue and as developed by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in policies, programs, and services and decrees applicable at the local level. Then to organize capacity building workshops for staff and authorities at the local level, specifically on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and its monitoring mechanisms. Then to collect data and on human rights, but also on the barriers that persons with disabilities face, giving priority to children, women, migrants, and older persons with disabilities. And fourth, to facilitate the implementation and monitoring through local and regional mechanisms of the right to make decisions for persons with disabilities. There are invisible disabilities that are having very difficult times to make decisions, like persons with mental, intellectual, cognitive, and psychosocial disabilities. This is a very big issue all over the world. That is the right to make decisions. And then finally, with the second question about what moving forward the Office of the Special Envoy, particularly the Special Envoy, could request to this town hall. Number one is the supporting local governments to review those policies and regulations that are excluding underrepresented minorities with disabilities. And of course that we have different groups that still are underrepresented at the local level with disabilities and with multiple areas of discrimination. Then working with local governments and employers to provide remote working and reasonable accommodations to do so without discrimination during health emergencies, pandemics, and after these events. That requires the local government to work with the private sector. Two more points of the Special Envoy: facilitate consultations and meetings with the local governments and the private companies to guarantee the online platforms for working, learning and education, communications, phone-based consultations, hotlines, and telemedicine services that are accessible and respectful of the rights of persons with disabilities. And my final point, which is the point of the Special Envoy, collaborating with international organizations, human rights committees, like the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and local and regional governments and organizations of persons with disabilities to collect reliable, timely, and disaggregated data, quantitative and qualitative data on disability, ensuring confidentiality. And this data collection should include information collected during and post-COVID-19 and generate indicators on civil, political, economic, social, and cultural areas, aiming at removing barriers revealed by the pandemic. So this is a summary. The Office of the Special Envoy and the Special Envoy and myself are very interested in continue to collaborate with you. And thank you so much for this space.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for those inputs. I think as UCLG, we have adopted. In fact, those recommendations are already in the policy paper that we produced together with World Unable for our World Council to adopt. So I think we can feel comfortable with that. I think where we need to get our act around is how can we enhance the impact of promoting some of these ideas, and what areas do we need to work on together to actually achieve some of those. So if everybody agrees, I would go now to next steps. What I propose as next steps for our thinking together, and if you have other ideas, I mean, we will be happy to accommodate. We don't have, I mean, we know we want to carry on working with you. We know that we want to continue providing a space for local and regional governments to exchange experience, enhanced by the knowledge of the stakeholders that are here, and paying attention to all the specific topics that you bring to the table. This we know. Right? Now, what we need to define is what do this series of experiences entail. So in order to shape that together with you, what I propose is that we work on the report of this session with some issues for action, some proposals to choose from, and some calls for you to provide feedback on. And we will be producing all of this within a period of the coming 2 weeks. Let us try to do as quick as possible. Then you can comment, you can kill the ideas, you can bring new ideas. As I say, this is a co-creation process. But hopefully you will also react to some of the issues that you might need to expand on yourselves, your different organizations, or you personally. Then we identify whether we can do this as part of the work that we are already doing together, and I think a lot of it is possible within what we are doing, but there might be a part where we need to look for additional resources, and that's fine. Let us not be less ambitious about this. We want to do this. We want to move forward, and I think that needs to be also part of the plan. The idea is that by mid October we have something that is solid, and that already looks like initiatives that we can carry together. In parallel to this, we propose to continue doing some of the learning sessions, depending on the topics that we had identified. Our sense is that this will have a knowledge component that will need to strengthen the data aspect of this. You have all said that. So we will need to develop that kind of portal that also Aromar and many of you with the indicators that you were referring to. There needs to be a learning space component, which I think we kind of have because we have the community already, but we need to enhance it with new tools and renew it with the approach of the topics as they have been shared here. And there is this other part also on campaigning, and it is advocacy. In fact, it's advocacy for and against. I think we need to identify those issues that we want to defend, that we want the international community and the communities all over the world to pay attention to. And I think is trust in public transport, support for service delivery, all the commons, decent work conditions. All of these things are things that we want to promote. But I also think that we need to clearly express our concern as a group about other developments, and then here the whole situation around safety and the way that democracy might be endangered by some of the governance changes might come also to the table, and we will need to deal with that. And all of these needs to be seasoned with good learning tools. That's what I've heard from you. We will try to reflect it on this report, and then as I say, let us work around it. If we do this well, this can be a big contribution to making the briefing of the UN Secretary General actionable for member states. And that is the bigger aim, I think, also that we need to go to enhance our dialogue with member states. We are thinking at the level of the Global Task Force to revitalize the Friends of the Cities group, Maria Fernanda, that was active with the ambassadors. We need to see whether you that are still very much in touch with them, whether you think there is a will for this. We need to look into this. So many different dimensions for this new pack of activities. we count with all of you. If you don't want to be with us, you need to say it very soon, because we will be calling on you for support. And Octavi, you have the last word.
Oh, I'm overwhelmed. No, I think you have provided us with a clear framework on how to continue. I think that the idea is that it doesn't mean that we have to do in all together and join everything and do it together, but where we can add and have added value in joint topics, in joint areas, then of course we have to go together. And I'm sure there will be other areas that we agree, but that's as well, that's life. And I mean, that's the reality. And I think that the motto should be transformation. We should work together when we are sure that we are going to transform our cities and we are going to transform our reality and we are going to fight for a more equal society.
So thank you very much. We will call another meeting somewhere in October. We will keep you posted. Keep healthy and calm and creative, as we always say in this session. Thank you very much, colleagues. See you soon. It has been a pleasure. Bye. Ciao.